Now, maritime history buffs are preparing to mark 100 years since the sinking of the Titanic. For more on next week's centenary, reporter Erin Bell joins us now from the Australian National Maritime Museum in Sydney. Over to you, Erin.
Good morning. Well, that's right. This month does mark the 100th anniversary of the tragic sinking of the Titanic, and a century on, and it seems that images from that event still manage to captivate the world, as do the many stories of those on board the ship. Now, that is the theme of an exhibition here at the National Maritime Museum, and in fact I'm actually joined by a Titanic historian, Inga Scheel, as well as Godfrey Lowe, who is the grandson of a very brave man on board the Titanic. But let's start with you, Inga. Can you tell us a little bit about the exhibition?
Well, Erin, Remembering Titanic is the National Maritime Museum's attempt to commemorate the story of the Titanic, which is really a collection of stories, both the people who built it, the people who sailed in it, and of course those who perished and those who lived. We tell this story through objects, through very strong visuals, and we also explore the popular culture aspect of it, including objects like some fantastic costumes from James Cameron's movie.
Now, of course, as a Titanic historian, you're about to set off on a very special trip this evening. Tell us a bit about that.
That's correct. I'll be joining the Titanic Memorial Cruise sailing out of Southampton, which will be calling at the Titanic's last port of call in Ireland, in Cove, and then sailing on to New York. And on the anniversary at 2:20 a.m. in the morning of the 15th of April, there will be a service over the wreck site.
Now, of course, for the last 15 years, the Titanic has been a very special topic to you. You've been writing a book. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, very much so. It's been the book's about Harold Godfrey Lowe, who was the fifth officer of the Titanic, who was a remarkable figure. He was the only officer to attempt to return and rescue survivors from the wreck, and then to sail onto the rescue ship and rescue boat, to take in tow a lifeboat and to rescue the occupants of another lifeboat.
Sounds like a very brave man, and in fact we are joined by his grandson, Godfrey. Sounds like a familiar name there. I imagine there would have been some interesting stories told over time along the family there of the Titanic.
Yes, indeed. My grandfather, Harold Godfrey Lowe, and I'm very proud to be named after him. He was a very private man, so he didn't talk much about it with his father, but my father, he did tell a few stories. And one story was linked to the one that Inga mentioned about him going back. And if you remember that graphic scene in the movie where the young officer goes back into the flotsam and jetsam field to rescue some bodies, and there's the young officer standing on the prow of the ship saying, "Anybody alive out there?" That was my grandfather, so I'm very proud of him.
Sounds like a very brave man. Did he ever talk about the fear in that moment of the Titanic going down?
No, I think a bit like people who come back from the war, he was kind of traumatised by the event, and while it made a great impression upon him, he didn't talk much about it with my father, but he did talk about a few things. And one little event that he mentioned, and Inga mentioned about him rescuing some people on a boat, as he was coming back from rescuing people, he came across a boat that was sinking, and people were kind of anxious at that point in time. That's probably an understatement, and they were about to sort of jump in the boat as he was coming alongside them. And to keep them under control, he whisked out his revolver and said, "I'll shoot the first man that jumps a ship," because he didn't want the boat to overturn. Anyway, order was restored. And when they got back to the Carpathia in this wonderful warmth of the morning sun where things were settled down, the fellow that he pointed the gun at came up to him and said, "Thank you very much." He was an American gentleman, and said, "I've got a sovereign here which won't be any use in America, so let me give it to you." And my grandfather said, "Of course, you've got to give something back in return." He said, "What'll I give him?" And so he got out his revolver, broke it, took out a bullet and said, "Here, have the bullet that I nearly gave you."
Wow, fantastic story, and you've got that sovereign there in your hand.
I do indeed have the very sovereign here.
Quite a special piece of memorabilia to hold on to from that event.
Just special. I mean, it takes you straight back to that time, so the connection to the moment 100 years ago is right here in my hand.
Now, 100 years on, to have your grandfather honoured in this way with this book, and also to be reliving all of these memories, what will we be doing to mark the event?
Well, we have my sister, who's also a grandchild, and she has some grandchildren, and I have a couple of grandchildren, so they're great-grandchildren. Great-great-grandchildren, I'm sorry, so there'll be a family get-together to celebrate that special moment.
And perhaps a wander through the museum as well?
Yes, indeed. We'll certainly do that.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Now, that exhibition will in fact be open until the 11th of November, so plenty of opportunity to have a look at the memorabilia and to read through those stories of the many people on board that ship, of course on board the Titanic, and to remember it 100 years on.
Great stuff. Erin Bell in Sydney, thank you very much.